This is from Eli Detlaff. Would you rather work with too much footage or too little? Too much possibly bloating the themes of the film, and too little possibly making it too dry? Great question.
Unquestionably, I would rather work with too much footage than not enough. There's nothing worse than not having enough footage. It's, I guess, to use a cliche, it's like pulling teeth. Having too much footage, I always say you can't have too much footage. I mean, it becomes, difficult, and sometimes it could have budgetary ramifications because you need the time to go through all that material, and you need tons of people to sort of organize that material like we talked about earlier. But you could always cut out the footage that you don't need. But if you don't have it, it's infinitely more difficult and expensive to go back and get it.
This question comes in from Channel Midnight. What was the most challenging scene you had to edit, and why?
There are so many. I mean, every movie has its challenges, and they have their challenges for different reasons. It could just be an improv scene with tons of jokes and tons of lines being read different ways and nothing matching. To just, a scene like at the end of Assassins with Antonio Banderas and Sylvester Stallone and Julianne Moore, where Stallone's, trying to assassinate Banderas. And, Richard Donner provided us with, great footage and just trying to, sort of like make that as interesting as possible. Or, something like in a comedy scene, like in a comedy like Are We There Yet? With the visual effects and the green screen, and so they all have their unique challenges. I don't really find one more difficult than the other, but I will tell you that the scenes that you have to go through mountains and mountains of material to assemble are probably the most difficult because they're just so time consuming and you have so many choices. So you really have to sort of, take it in small bites. It's, that whole saying, how do you eat an elephant, one bite at a time. And that's really like, how you have to deal with that kind of stuff. So, I mean, I might not just lay it out in a timeline, just start cutting. I might have to go and I might have to do select reels for scenes with, huge amounts of material. So you make a select reel, and the select reel could have, could be a half hour long, and it could just be readings of this one line, who knows, or, maybe just this one part of the scene. So those are the kind of difficult things, and really sort of pulling the trigger on what you think is going to be best for the scene.
And is that usually from a director who's done multiple takes? Like some directors probably are known for just being more...
It's not so much multiple takes anymore because with digital, cinematography, you've got these memory cards where they don't necessarily have to yell cut at all. So basically you'll get a lot of resets in those takes. So sometimes, or quite often, you'll get takes that are, like I say, 30 minutes long. And that's part of the organizational process that my assistants have to go through and mark it all up so I can just find the stuff and just plow. And then there's things about, digital cinematography that, they don't yell cut because that will break the set. And basically that'll cause everyone to sort of like go to the craft service table and get coffee and donuts, I guess is the prevailing, sort of thought. And so they don't yell cut. And sometimes you'll have 10 minutes of, or no, maybe not 10 minutes, but 5 minutes of the director with the actor off to the side just discussing stuff. And so it's kind of like having to go through all that stuff. And, But again, my assistants mark that stuff up for me, so I know that that's just garbage.
Why do people fail in Hollywood?
I think the biggest reason people fail in Hollywood is they give up. I think that the most important thing that they don't tell you about is that you have to stick with it. Working in the crafts in Hollywood is incredibly demanding. It's demanding on your personal life as well as your, professional life. It's a freelance business, which a lot of people have difficulty adjusting to, understanding. It's such a different rhythm than maybe like a 9-to-5 job. It's not a 9-to-5 job. It's a feast or famine job. And, I think people have timetables sort of laid out in their minds about when they're going to get to where in their career. And, it usually doesn't happen that way. So they get discouraged and they throw in the towel. I think that the people who succeed are people who stick with it and work at it and are in it to win it. They learn these things and they develop patience and they hang there.
Are you willing to share your most difficult year in Hollywood?
Oh yeah, sure. I don't mind that at all. My most difficult year in Hollywood was working on 2 films that did pretty poorly at the box office, and basically erased any of the good that I did in my previous years working in the film business, where I had been nominated for an Emmy and had worked on some really great films. Unfortunately, when producers look at a resume, they often just look at the last few credits, and there's some truth to that expression. You're only as good as your last couple of credits. If you have a couple of stinkers in a row, it can really, really put the brakes on your career. I mean, unfortunately, especially as an editor, and as an editor, you might only have 1 credit a year, as opposed to a DP who might shoot 4 movies a year. If it takes 3 months to shoot a movie, you can do 4. A mixer could mix 6 movies a year or 7, but an editor can only work on 1 or 2 movies a year. Studio length features or so on. So it leaves a real stink on you. I mean, the same thing happens to directors. Don't get me wrong. I mean, and it happens worse because it takes much longer for them to get a project off the ground. So I had a couple of stinkers in a row, and then the economy crashed, and I didn't work for a really long time. And my only advice for people, if something like that happens, and invariably it will happen. The economy works in cycles. This business works in cycles. You got to have something else that you have a passion for, and you've got to be able to pursue that to a certain extent. And I think that what's really exciting about this time is that there are so many other ways to pursue your passion as a filmmaker. I mean, you can go out there and make your own films, start your own YouTube channel, write your own script. I mean, there's so many things that you can do. I mean, obviously you got to put food on the table, but I hung in there, and eventually there was light at the end of the tunnel. I don't really know. I couldn't imagine myself in any kind of corporate job. I've toyed with the idea, well, maybe I could become a post-production supervisor or something like that, or some kind of, that doesn't interest me. I mean, it's just, I'm a creative individual who works, with pictures and sounds and stories. And, I guess I could always deliver pizzas or something like that. but you just hang in there. And eventually I got a gig.
Would you say that's just part of what you had answered earlier about why people fail and they don't stay in the business long enough? So there's that chance for success, but most assuredly there's also the chance that they will have some very down years, a bad project or 2 underneath them. And that's to be prepared for.
I think you should definitely prepare yourself for leaner times. Absolutely, as a freelance employee, as a freelance creative, you've got to be aware. You've got to be aware of the vagaries of the marketplace, of the economy. You'd be foolish not to. And if you're in the game long enough, you will eventually experience some slower times. I would assume that this happens to all but the biggest editors. I mean, you know, once you've worked on 1, 2, or 3 big blockbuster films for the most prestigious directors, you've got a pretty good, I don't want to say guarantee, because there are no guarantees, but you've got a pretty good chance that you're going to be able to work regularly and be offered projects from other people all the time. You know, to be perfectly honest with you, that's a very small group of people, you know, and that group of directors is a very small group. So for the rest of us, yeah, you know, you've got to be prepared for slow times. I mean, I've been through a couple of cycles already where just the business slowed down. There was a threat of a strike. There was a strike. I mean, the craziest things could happen, and all of a sudden you find yourself out of work for 6, 8, 10 months, a year. It's, you know, it's something you should really have a plan B for.